So what we want to do next is try to understand the project that we're going to build. So it's going to be a simple university API where we can get a list of students, and we can also get a list of what courses they've taken and what courses they haven't taken. You can go in and update what courses students have taken or enrolled into and so on. So it's going to be a simple API, but along the way we are going to learn a lot of things in terms of software development and also how to package this into an API. And this can be your machine learning project or another software project as well. So the next step in our journey in here is to actually get hold of a database. So in this section, what we are going to do is use a database called Postgres. So Postgres is relational database, and there is a quick comparison of all these databases that I've done in the SQL course. So if you do have access to that, please do check that out. But in a nutshell, what Postgres is, it's, think of it like Google Sheets or an Excel file, if you will. So there are rows and columns, and there are multiple Google Sheets, so these are called as tables, and within those tables there are columns, and you can put all these tables together and call it a database. And you can have several of these databases in an instance of Postgres. So Postgres is again based on relational database, and you use SQL to interact with this, and it's a relational database. There are also non-relational databases, there are document databases, etc., which we're not going to touch upon, but in our case Postgres is good, and we'll see how to interact with this. Now, to actually install this on our machine, there's again a lot of challenges with this as well, and you're going to face this in real world. Do you want to install this on your machine, or do you want to just use one of the hosted services by AWS or GCP? So there are a lot of things that you can think of, but most probably the quickest solution would be to just put this in a Docker container and run this locally. Now that was quite a lot. So let's understand what Docker is next. So Docker is another environment tool similar to a virtual environment, but in this case, it will package up a smaller Linux machine into a file or an image in this case. So Docker is very, very useful. It doesn't have to be just Linux. You can run so many other operating systems within Docker as well. And we are going to be using Docker to actually run Postgres database. And once we start running all these things, it'll make much more sense. And eventually we're going to package our own application into a Docker container as well, and push that into an EC2 instance or GCP, whichever will work in the end, which we are going to try a few things out and see how far we get with all of this. So an easy way to get started with Docker is by coming into docker/get started and installing it on your relevant operating system, Mac or in Windows or Linux, whatever it is. And when you do have it fully installed, it's going to look something like this when you open it up. So you can see a list of containers. Again, we'll see all of this in as we go along. So there are containers, there are images. So this is what I meant. The images can be an operating system on its own, or in this case, it can be a database or an application, etc. There are volumes and there are environments, etc. So in this case, we are having Docker running on our machine. So the next step is to actually download a Postgres instance onto our machine and have it run in the background, so that our application has access to this database to write and read from this database. And having this run locally, it's going to increase and speed up our development time a lot, because we're not having to wait for the internet to connect to our database. So we don't have to wait for that time it takes to do a round trip between the database and our machine. So when you're doing development locally, running a Docker container is perfectly acceptable and even recommended. So to get started with Docker container, we'll use Docker image, and we'll put that in a docker compose.yaml file. So go ahead and click on this new button and then start by writing docker-compose.yaml. So we start this docker compose YAML file by giving it a version, which is 3.8 in our case, and then we'll go ahead and fill this up. So there are a few things, and you can keep this Docker Compose YAML around for a while as well, because it's not just this project that you will be using this. It can be any other project where you need access to Postgres or any other database or any other application as well. So the next thing we want to write is something called as services. Here is where we define all the services like the Docker image and other things that we want to use. Next, we have a DB. This is a name that we are giving it to our service. And here we are specifying an image, and this image is called Postgres 15 Alpine. Now, where are we getting this image from? So if I come into Google and search for Docker Hub and go into Docker Hub, here is another repository similar to GitHub, but in here it's only Docker images that are hosted for use by us. So if I come in here and search for Postgres, you'll see the official Postgres images, you'll see other third-party images and so on as well. And you can come in and find your favorite database. So if you want to do MongoDB, so you can come in here and find MongoDB and see which one you like, and you can get stats on how much installs it's had and how many stars it has, etc. And you will find a lot of images here. And if you want, you can sign up and also host your own images. The university API that we're going to build, you can push that into a repository like Docker Hub, and people can use this in their own work as well, or you can use this image that you're going to build and deploy it to some other services using CI/CD, etc. We're not going to do all that, but what we're interested in is this image over here, Postgres. And there are quite a few tags as well. Think of tags are like versions. So if you come in here, there is this version that you can just copy this and then put it in your Docker image, or you can get the full name over here as well, Postgres-13.4. Now, in our case, we want Postgres-15 Alpine. Alpine and other things are just a flavor of Postgres and how it's being packaged up. Sometimes you don't want all the things that comes with Postgres. You just want the minimum that we need to run Postgres. So in that case, Alpine and so on will be a bit smaller in size as well, which we can use. So you can come in here and look for all these tags and see which one you want. And in our case, we just want Alpine, so that is good. And now you understand where this file is coming from. Next, we want to give it a volume. So volumes are again local to your system. So if we define a volume, when we shut down this Docker service, it will persist the data that it's already there in this location. So in our case, it's Postgres data is our machine location, which we'll define in a bit. And then this defines the location inside our Docker image. So we'll see how this works, but essentially this means that once you stop your Docker Compose and then rerun it, the data will still be there. You won't lose it. Next, we want to define the ports. So this is the machine port or the host port that we are working on. And then this is the port inside this DB image. So we are exposing 5432 from inside to outside so that we can access it from the outside. And we are saying we want to expose 5432. That's fine. And then we give it a few environment variables. Now, if you want to see what exact configurations go into your Docker image, you can come in here again, actually into this website, and then start reading this overview. It will say what kind of versions they're supporting. And if you scroll down somewhere, it will also give you how to go about building this Docker image or using Docker Compose. So they've given a file over here, and they can also give the environment variables, like in this case we are defining Postgres password and so on. So that's a good thing to know. So in here we'll define a Postgres user, which is University API user. We'll give it a password and a database name as well. So again, database is just a collection of think of it like collection of Excel files, and in that we'll have many tables, and those tables will have columns, etc., which is a relational database in our case. Next, we have this volumes over here, Postgres data, which we are specifying, and we don't need to specify a location for this. So this can be the default location that Docker has decided for us. But all we're saying is there is a location called Postgres on a machine in this Mac I'm using. So put that into my image so that all the data that gets written into PostgreSQL gets written into Postgres data, which is accessible on my machine. And this volume is separate from this image. So even if you stop this service over here, this volume still exists, so we won't lose the data. So this is all we need to run Postgres database. So a quick way to run this is just to come in here and do Docker Compose up. So this is a simple command. So docker compose, because we are using docker compose file. Now there is a way to run just docker on its own as well. So that is what we were seeing in the tag section. So if I come into tags, you see here it says docker pull, and you can directly pull this and run on your machine, which we don't want at this point anyways. We want to put this in a Docker Compose so that you can have multiple services. So you can have hundreds of services if you want, but in most cases it'll be like 3 or 4 different services that you really want, and then you can start everything up simultaneously, or you can queue them up. So you say, I want to start my DB image first and then start my own application and so on. So we'll see all of that in the next section. But anyways, to start this DB Postgres, at least in my case, I'll just do docker compose up. So it's doing a couple of things, and it says it's listening on port 0000, and port is 5432. Sorry, it says it's listening on IP 0000, which is my local host, and then it says port is 5432. So this is good. So now we've seen that this Docker has started and it's running. So you can see it's created a database and so on. You can look through all the logs it has generated. But in your case, if you don't have Postgres already installed, it's going to go and download the Postgres image from here. So if you see here, this is like 130 MB and so on. So it's going to download all of that, and then it's going to start the Docker container and it's going to start running this. Now, what we can try is to actually browse this database. So if I come in here and type in Postgres admin or Postgres SQL, you see there is a management tool over here. There are quite a few as well, but I found this. Let me just install this and see if this works to help us to navigate our database. So if I come in here, it says there's a way to run this as well. Now I see this Postgres icon show up in my sidebar. So I'll click on this and click this plus icon. So it says we want to enter, it's asking for a host name. So I'll just say 0.0.0.0. So I can look up my Postgres username, which is University API user. So I'll just put this user. The password is University API password. So that is good. 5432 is the port that we're using. So that is good as well. I'll just say standard connection now, and we'll say, so it's already showing up the database. So there is University API DB, which we've just created, but let me just show all databases, and we'll call this Docker University API DB. So that's created now. So you can come in here and look at the database that we have. So this is successfully connected to our own local database over here. And once we start creating more files and we can run queries on this, etc., we should be able to interact with this database as well. Now, if you want to stop this Docker container, you can just press Control C, or you can come into the application that you're using, this Docker desktop, which you just opened up, and you see the status is running. And you can come in here and look at containers. It's started up this container as well, and these are all running. So you can come in here into the container and click on stop, or you can go into the terminal directly and click on Control C. So now that this is stopped, I can come in here and let's see if I refresh items. So you see here it says connection refused because we've stopped our container. So we verified that this sidebar was actually coming from the Docker instance that we connected to. So in the next section, we are going to look at how to write tests against this database and how to go about build our API and so on. So this is a step-by-step sort of a software development process for building an API, which you will be useful globally whenever you're doing any of data science or AI and machine learning and all these things, where building an API is kind of fundamental to what we do.